What's going on, guys? My name is Aldeniro and welcome to another episode of Top 5 Tweets. In this edition, due to popular demand and constant never-ending requests, we're going to be examining the already parody of an account, Boring James Milner. The fifth greatest tweet that James has ever presented to the world goes like this: I've just realised that Rio Ferdinand is working for the BBC in Rio. It made me laugh so much I had to sit down for a bit. Actually, James, that's really not funny at all. In fact, there are numerous cities and towns dotted all over the world that share common, popular male names, making this nothing more than a slightly strange and perhaps moderately humorous matter. But it should not have rendered you unable to stand up, and if you experience other symptoms similar to that, such as nausea, dizziness, or lightheadedness, it's highly recommended that you visit a doctor. The fourth greatest tweet from this account presents us with a screenshot of a text message conversation between James Milner and his teammate Edin Dzeko. Edin Dzeko phoned James Milner but realised at some point that he was supposed to have phoned Joe Hart instead and proceeded to redial with the correct contact, leaving James uninformed of the situation until Edin confirmed by text message that he was in fact attempting to call England number 1 Joe Hart. James Milner then questioned the order of the listing of contacts in Edin Dzeko's phone, but to no avail, as Edin refused to reply. It's highly likely, or at least it seems to me as if Edin can actually reply to this text message, as he's on the phone to Joe Hart, and multitasking on such a level is presumably difficult. However, it's also possible that Edin didn't even see the text message because he's on the phone and it might be on silent. The next greatest tweet from England international James Milner comes from June of this year during the World Cup, where James shares his opinion on a match between Iran and Nigeria, a group stage draw, of which James says, "I've got to say, Iran versus Nigeria has been the game of the tournament for me. What a belter. It had everything." He's right, it did have everything. I can specifically remember watching that game and thinking, that's strange. This game isn't being played at as high a tempo of the other games at all in this World Cup, but the tactical display is still significant enough to keep me watching, and the anticipation is steadily building throughout each of the halves. The second greatest tweet to be produced by James Milner comes from September, when he says, "I've realised that we played Sheffield Wednesday on an actual Wednesday. You couldn't make it up, could you?" Actually, James, to start with, you left out a question mark at the end of that tweet, which really belonged there, but the main reason I take offence to this tweet is because although the day Wednesday and the club Sheffield Wednesday share a word in their respective titles, this was a Capital One Cup game which are mostly played on Wednesday nights, and as the club Sheffield Wednesday are in a different league to Manchester City, it's virtually impossible for them to play in anything other than a cup competition. Now, this is the interesting part. The Capital One Cup is the first cup that gets played in the season for bigger teams, and with Manchester City being drawn against Sheffield Wednesday, there's actually only a small chance that it could be played on any other day of the week apart from a Wednesday, so interestingly enough, you could actually make it up. It's also in fact far more likely than any other option. Now here comes the really interesting part. Manchester City are actually playing against Sheffield Wednesday again this season. However, this time it's in the FA Cup and the game will take place on a Sunday. If by some chance this game turned into a draw, a replay would be scheduled and again would be most likely to take place on you guessed it, a Wednesday. You couldn't make it up, could you? The greatest tweet from this account, however, comes from June during the World Cup, when James tweeted a tale from the England dressing room. "I said to Gerrard it was just like watching Liverpool when you set up Suarez. He said, 'This really isn't the time for jokes, James.' I said, 'Okay.'" On the face of it, this makes Gerrard come across as being abrupt in his attempt to shoot down Milner's witty take on the match against Uruguay, but I think James should have known better than to try and damage the team's morale in this way after they'd come out the wrong end of a pretty difficult game. But people deal with things in different ways, and I still think James Milner is a great guy, and although he showed perhaps a slight moment of immaturity in this instance, I'll continue to follow his career, and I hope he continues to update us with his incredibly exciting adventures in his lavish footballer lifestyle. That is, however, the end of this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this fascinating insight into one of England's most popular and entertaining footballers. If he ever gets off the front pages and continues to tweet, I may even do a part 2 of James Milner because he is an incredibly fascinating human being. If you guys have any other suggestions for other candidates for this series, do leave them in the comment section below. I've been Aldeniro. Thanks for watching.